Welcome to Detoxicity, a podcast that aims to reframe the narrative around masculinity by way of sharing experiences and stories. If you're looking for one of those alpha male podcasts that isn't centered around things like inclusivity and vulnerability, you are in the wrong place. Or maybe you're in the right place if you recognize that the Joe Rogans and the Red Pills of the world shouldn't be the norm. Anyway, I'm Mike Joseph, I host and produce this show, and I'm happy you're here. We are closing in on 5 years of this podcast, and I appreciate all the support I've received and would love to thank everyone who's been a guest now and in the future for allowing yourselves this space to share your story. If you'd like to know more about the guests, I suggest following them on social media. I usually mention where you can find them at the end of each episode. You can follow me on Instagram at DetoxPod. You can request a free coaching consultation from me at mike-joseph.com. And you can support Detoxicity by spreading the word to friends, by liking and commenting on whatever platform you're using to listen, or by becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/detoxicitypod and subscribe for as little as $3 a month, and you will get early access to episodes. I'll even send you a cool DetoxPod fridge magnet. Thank you for listening, and enjoy this latest episode. So I think we have only done one crossover episode previously in the history of Detoxicity, and that was way back in the day in 2021 when we did a live episode with Live from the Swing Set. And so here is the second crossover episode in the history of Detoxicity. If I'm incorrect on that, somebody please message me, email me, and correct me. I am happy to bring back Rob Cohen, who is the host of the Two Bi Guys podcast. This episode will be live both on Detoxicity and on Two Bi Guys, so it might sound a little, I guess, maybe disjointed in the middle. I cut out pieces of Rob's intro just to sort of make it make more sense on this end. Anyway, like I said, Rob is the host of Two Bi Guys. We had him on episode 153, which was about a year ago, and he was in the process of releasing a book about bisexual men who are married to women. That book is out. He has since done a book tour. I was pleased to be one of the people that saw him on that book tour when he was here in New York. He's also expanded quite a bit professionally into being a coach and as well as doing some stand-up comedy. So a wide array of careers for Rob Cohen. And what really was the impetus behind this episode was not just to reconnect, but to talk about the experiences that we had both recently had at the time of recording with alternative medicinal treatments, I guess you would call them, sort of alternative therapeutic methods. His involved plants, specifically ayahuasca and psychedelics. Mine encompassed a ketamine treatment, and it's really been interesting to listen back to this episode. And my experience at the time was that the ketamine treatment had been helpful, and my symptoms were kind of slowly starting to return. Well, since I recorded that episode, my symptoms have fully returned, even after an additional ketamine treatment. So, at the time that I record this intro and release this episode, while I do think that there was some benefit to the treatment, I will say that it is quite cost prohibitive. And, you know, for some people, it may be a situation where a limited amount of treatments will get them their desired results, whereas for some others, and I think I am part of this, more extensive, lengthy treatment is going to be required to get to the point where I want to be. And I will add, and I think I say this in the episode, that the treatment alone does not rid you of depressive disorder or anxiety disorder or post-traumatic stress or anything of that nature, that it has to be combined with other things like talk therapy or additional medication or making life changes, whether that be sort of mindfulness mindfulness meditation type stuff, or, you know, life changes on a bigger level. You know, it's not a magic bullet. I never thought it was. I certainly don't think it is now. But anyway, you get to hear about my experiences and Rob's experiences through these different types of alternative therapy, which I do recommend that you try if you have the desire and the finances to employ these methods. Anyway, enough of me talking. Let's go into the episode. We don't just talk about that. We do talk about sort of the impetus behind both of the podcasts that we do, and what masculinity and the discussion around masculinity is going to look like in 2025 and possibly beyond. Anyway, enough of me talking. Here is Rob.
Well, hello. My name is Rob. Good to see you again,
Good
Mike.
to see you again.
When was I here last? Like 2 years ago or something like that?
It was before the book came out.
Okay. So it was over a year ago,
Yeah.
probably a year and a half or something. I guess I'm here because I've had an evolving relationship with masculinity and been learning a lot about what that is and what it means. And we kind of found each other and connected virtually over that. But more specifically, I came out as bi in my early 30s. I'm now in my late 30s. I might be 40 by the time this comes out.
Happy early birthday, I guess.
Thank you. We'll talk about that. But when I came out as bi, that felt like it was a big catalyst for reevaluating masculinity and my identity in general. So it's been a journey the last 10 years. And I started a podcast called Two Bi Guys. We'll be using this recording on my podcast as well.
It's what do you call it? It's a crossover show.
Yes, this is the first official crossover, I think.
Nice.
I've done collabs, but this is our new experiment of actually doing a 2-in-1. And yeah, those two journeys have felt tied together for me, the sexuality and the masculinity. So that's what we talked about last time, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And since you were here the last time, you released a book.
I released a book, yes. It's called Bisexual Married Men, Stories of Relationships, Acceptance, and Authenticity. And it's about the specific experience of bi men who are married to women, which I don't think is like a more valid or more important experience than others. I just think is an extremely common experience that there was nothing about in the literature. And I would like to write more books about other kinds of bi marriages between men and trans people, like all different things. But that was where I started. And it also it took over a year, but it just came out as an audiobook as well. So
nice. I'm assuming you're narrating it.
No, you would assume that. I assumed that. But no, they did not want me to narrate it. They have a pipeline of books from this publisher that just get farmed out to be read by someone. And I did not read it. An actor named Daniel Henning read it. Oh. I've listened to some of it and he's great. He's wonderful. So I'm glad it worked out. But yeah, no, it's not me.
Wow, that's actually very surprising. Not that I know how audiobooks work at all. But so in the time since your book has been published, you've also done some book tour date kind of things. I know you did gatherings in New York. I attended that. And you did one in LA, which is where you live.
That was the first time we met in person.
It was the first time we met in person, yes.
Yeah. First and only, I guess.
Yeah, so far.
So far, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for coming to that. That one was fun. We did it at the LGBT Center. I did another book event in LA at Book Soup. Was it Book Soup? Yeah, I think it was Book Soup.
You tell me.
Which is a cool queer bookstore out here. I did some virtual events. I've done some book groups. I did a book group at this virtual group called HOW, which stands for Husbands Out to Wives. That's for gay and bisexual men who are out to their wives, which is an important distinction. There are some bi men who are married to women, and they're as counterintuitive as it might seem, there are gay men who are married to women. And
yes,
those are two different experiences.
Yes, they are.
But they're 100%. All in the same group, and I spoke to them. So yeah, I've done a handful of book things for the past year, and the book led to my coaching practice. So now I'm coaching bi men, many of whom are married to women.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That also started since, after the book came out. I started coaching around March of last year, and it's going really well, and I love it. It's coming very naturally. Yeah, it's been cool.
Awesome. I mean, I would ask what's changed for you since the book came out, but it seemed like there was stuff in motion, like the coaching that was already sort of in progress when you
Yeah.
released the book. What has been the most interesting observation that you've made in the time since the book has come out?
Man.
Maybe there are a few.
That's a good question. I guess just like I kind of knew this would happen, but how many people it's resonated with, and just the comments I've gotten that have just been like, there was no one telling this story before. And so many people who connect so specifically with certain stories in the book, and how validating it's been for them to hear, oh, there's someone like me. There's another marriage like this. And like, now I'm working with many of those guys, just like how common many of the struggles are, and also unique to each person and the ins and outs of it. Like, the coaching is very specific to the exact thing that's going on in their lives. And yet, for many people in mixed orientation marriages or just queer relationships in general, how many of the same issues come up. And yeah, I just see a lot of the same stuff over and over, and it's really complicated stuff. And yet it's also stuff that you can work through and you can move forward on.
Absolutely. And in terms of your own journey in the years since you and I first spoke, what has changed? Has anything changed? What's different about Rob when I spoke to you a year ago versus Rob as we record this now?
Well, the coaching practice has been really nice to just get it going and know that I can do it, and that I'm finding clients, and I feel like we're making progress. I'm really helping them. They're enjoying it. I'm settling into that. Like a year ago, I was kind of, that was on the horizon, but I didn't know how it would go, or if I'd find clients, or would I know what I'm doing. And now I feel very settled and confident. And this is something not only I know I can do, but it's something I'm really enjoying doing and finding rewarding for me. And I learn stuff from my clients
Of
every
course.
time I meet with them. The other big thing for me this year has been my plant medicine journey. I know this was sort of the impetus
It was the
for
impetus for
us
us to start
reconnecting.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because you posted something, I think, and I was like, I'm on this journey as well. Let's talk about it. And it feels
Yeah.
very related to masculinity and sexuality.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I had always been interested in psychedelics. I tried mushrooms recreationally, smoked marijuana for many years, but I really started like a formal practice in May of 2024, going to these mushroom ceremonies, circles in LA, where you're in a room with 10 to 12 other people. You're all taking kind of a larger dose than what you might do recreationally. We sing songs. I'll tell you more about it, but we sing songs. It's very intentional. We do, like, it's work, it's healing work. It's not just for fun. And I've done a bunch of those. And then in November of 24, I sat with ayahuasca for a weekend. We did 3 sits, and that was a really profound spiritual experience. And all of that plant medicine work feels like it's a big shift in my life. And it's not necessarily changing how I see everything, but almost more confirming it, and I'm feeling it more in my body. And
Oh,
we can get into it, but that's the big thing, is the plant medicine.
okay. Yeah. So my
What?
knowledge
Yeah.
of this stuff is, I would say, relatively minimal, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
I know about ayahuasca, honestly, because Will Smith talked about it in his memoir.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and that was the first time I'd heard of ayahuasca. Our mutual acquaintance Dave Holmes also talks about having a plant medicine experience. He didn't specify although I assume it was shrooms based. But he writes about that in his biography as well.
Interesting.
I my drug experience, and it's so weird because people are like, oh, you work in the music business and you live in New York, you have to have had more drug experience than you have. And I'm like, no, to be perfectly honest with you, I smoked weed intermittently for the last 30 years.
Uh-huh.
And I dropped acid once,
Mm,
and I very recently, this past December, started doing ketamine therapy.
interesting.
So our experiences are not with the same drug,
Yeah.
essentially, but we are both using these things for therapeutic purposes. And I felt like getting you back on here, we could maybe just sort of like share what the experience has been like and what it has done for us in terms of our
Yeah.
journeys.
Absolutely. And I'm so curious about that. And in the plant medicine world, we don't call them drugs, we call it medicine
Sure,
because
sure.
apparently plant medicine makes us sanctimonious and pedantic about it. um, I'm
Plant
also writing
medicine.
some stand up about my ayahuasca experience
Right
as
on.
well.
Right on.
Gotta mine everything for content these
There you
days.
go. There you go. And
But
before to put a pin in that, we should also talk about you becoming a stand-up comic.
yeah,
Not
actually, that's
something
a
that,
new thing too since we
yeah,
spoke.
a lot of new
Yeah.
shit, Rob.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of new stuff it all feels like it's part of the same mission and purpose, but yes, it is like new things that are coming in. But yeah, I started stand up. I took a class last year from January till like March, and then I performed for the first time in April, talked about a lot of bi stuff and a lot of gay sex stuff, and I did a whole set about male masturbation parties one time that really shocked the straight people.
I
But
bet.
yeah, that's the stand up has been really fun and just like a joy to actually write stuff and perform it and get it out there instead of like spending 5 years writing something that nobody ever reads.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but I'm curious. I'm curious. I kind of want to hear you go first, especially since it sounds like you did this before I did the LSD or the acid. Like,
Yeah.
because that's very related to ayahuasca. I'm learning, even though they're different, they're very related. So,
I my
what was it like?
understanding my understanding is that ayahuasca is way more intense than LSD is.
Yeah.
So the time I dropped acid, that would have been, I'm doing math in my head, like 12 years ago.
Okay.
And the person that I was seeing at the time was, if on the drug scale I was a rookie, this guy was a seasoned veteran of drugs. And, it dropped acid a bunch of times, sort of like a hippie-ish kind of dude. And it was something that I'd thought about for a while, and I had the access. So I was like, I feel safe enough to do this. Let's do it. And, we came over on a Sunday afternoon, and we popped open a beer. We smoked a little bit of weed. And then he put the little tab on my tongue. And we sat on the couch and we started watching TV, and I started tripping balls. Um, it was not entirely unpleasant. I will say,
But mostly unpleasant.
no, actually, it was mostly pleasant. I enjoyed it.
Okay, good.
The one thing, this feels like a rookie mistake, my phone rang and I answered it. And it turned out to be a friend that I had recently done an intervention on and helped put in rehab,
Oh,
calling
fuck.
from rehab.
Wow.
So I'm 2, maybe 3 hours into an acid trip, out of my fucking mind,
Um,
and have to pull myself back to what I can only assume was the normal, undrugged version of me, to have this conversation and then go back into the trip. So that was not intelligent.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Rookie
But
mistake. No
yeah,
offense.
right. But I did it.
Put your phone away.
Yeah. And then, we tripped for a little while longer, or, well, I tripped for a lot while longer. And my partner at the time got hungry. We ordered a pizza. We eat the pizza. Maybe an hour after that, he's like, "You're good. I'm going to drive home." And He drove home, and maybe 15 minutes after we drove home, I was like, feels so good.
Mm.
And the pizza left my body and ended up all over my apartment.
Oh shit.
um,
Wow.
and well, two things about
Purge.
that. One, I was still tripping the next day. Like,
Uh,
I went to therapy the next day and I was still not fully out of my trip.
wow.
And the other thing is that I remember telling this guy about it the next day, and I was like, dude, I threw up all over the place. He was like, are you sure you're not imagining that? I'm like, there is caked up paper towels with vomit in my bathroom right now. It can only have come from one place. I'm not imagining this at all. So I gave the impression of apparently of seeming totally fine, but
Okay. All
I think
right.
we're fine.
Continue.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting experience. It was pretty intense. I'm not fully sure that I would repeat that level of intensity. I certainly am never going to eat a pizza in the middle of a drug film. Like, that is
That
not.
sounds like a smart idea.
Yeah, yeah. But that was my one, and up until a month and a half ago, only experience with any sort of psychedelic trip-inducing type of drug.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Interesting. And I mean, yeah, I'll compare that to the ayahuasca in a moment. Because we didn't eat anything like for hours beforehand, and then from the moment we drank it, I think there was probably 6 or 7 hours, and then as we're finally like coming out of it, then we all had a meal. So like, what did you gain any insight before you purged? Did you gain any insights, or how did you change from this experience besides not wanting to have that kind of a trip again?
I don't know that that particular experience changed very much. That was maybe more of like a funsies
Yeah,
thing, whereas
interesting.
the ketamine was done with the intention of being therapeutic.
Okay.
This was just like a cool, let's trip and see what happens type thing.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So tell us about the ketamine then. What was that?
I mean, much different experience, same amount of vomit. I have been in therapy for a really long time, and I have taken over the course of the last 17 or 18 years probably 12 different SSRIs.
Hmm.
Like, I actually went on Wikipedia once and looked at the page that they have for antidepressants and checked 13 things off the list that I had taken. Some of them more than once.
Wow.
Um, and antidepressants historically either give me a flat effect or they make me really drowsy, tired, sleepy, whatever. Or they crash my libido, give me severe erectile dysfunction. There's always something wrong with an antidepressant that I take, or they just don't
Mhm.
work. So I've been through the ringer on that stuff. After November 5th, I had a pretty big emotional crash. And I was basically like,
Why? What happened
right,
on November
right,
5th that would
right.
cause emotions? I don't
Imagine,
remember.
imagine. And, I was in a pretty low place. And my therapist was like, hey, have you ever thought of doing ketamine therapy? And I was like, actually, yes, I've thought about it. A few friends of mine have done it. They say it did really good things for them. My understanding is that it is prohibitively expensive. And my therapist was like, you know what? Let me do some research for you, and I will talk to your psychiatrist, and we're going to figure something out. So he talked to my psychiatrist and he talked to my general practitioner. All three together agreed that ketamine therapy was a good option. My psychiatrist sent me a list of places in New York City that offered ketamine therapy. One thing I didn't know is that ketamine therapy is partially accepted by some insurance. And I had a couple of consultations, signed up for it, and the initial sort of batch of it was 4 sessions in 2 weeks. Well, 5 sessions. It was an initial meeting with the doctor, and the
Mhm.
person that runs this particular clinic is a licensed ER doctor. You know, has his shit down pat. And basically, what they do is they screen you. make sure that you are not at risk for psychosis or anything that, the ketamine is going to activate in you. And you go in for the first session. It's a little woo-woo. There's like aromatherapy, and they sensory deprive you. They put a blindfold over you or a face mask, and
Uh-huh.
they put headphones on you. They give you an option of nature sounds or like new agey kind of music or that kind of thing. They
Mhm.
hook you up to an IV,
Oh.
and they administer ketamine to you, and you lay back and you trip balls for an hour.
Just 1 hour.
Yeah,
Huh.
it's the sessions are all 90 minutes. So it's 15 minutes of the initial sort of like, excuse me, get you situated, sit down, like choose your scent, choose your music, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. And then the last 15 minutes you have to sort of reorient yourself, because I can't speak for everybody, but when I came out of the trip I was pretty woozy. So it's like 15 minutes on the front, 15 minutes on the back, and then an hour for the actual treatment part of it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So it was 4 sessions. The last one was right before Christmas. And what they recommend is working with them to figure out a sequence in which you go back periodically and sort of get topped up, because like every antidepressant, ketamine wears off over time. Your symptoms can reoccur. It's just a matter of figuring out the frequency with which they reoccur and getting on a schedule of administration of the ketamine to counteract that.
mhm.
So I actually have my next appointment next week.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So what came up for you during those 4 or 5 hours? What was going through your mind when you're in it?
A lot of people. I like the two things I can definitively say. One is that uh, for the duration of almost every single session, I was in motion. I was driving something or riding something or in charge of operating a vehicle that was moving forward through the entire thing. There was no stillness, I
No
guess you would call
pause.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no
Uh-huh.
pause, which resulted in me getting motion sickness, hence more
Interesting.
throwing up. And I ended up taking some anti-nausea medication before that actually helped out. But
That's interesting. Just to like, so I don't forget it.
yeah.
Someone in my ayahuasca journey said she felt like she was flying,
Hmm.
and when she got sick, because that often happens on ayahuasca, it felt to her like altitude sickness, which is interesting that yours felt like motion sickness, even though both of you were just sitting there.
Sitting there, laying there, yeah. Flying as in she herself was flying like
Yeah.
a bird, or like in a plane as a passenger in a plane,
Oh,
or
I don't
piloting a
remember.
plane.
I don't remember if she said or if I just can't remember, but she said she felt like she was being taken to the stratosphere and she wasn't ready. And as she was acclimating to the altitude, that was when she got sick. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I felt like I was operating a vehicle, either a car, a plane, or a spaceship through pretty much all of my trips. So I remember that. And then it was just sort of a parade of humans that have been in my life at various times, people that I had not thought of in decades. Like I
Mm.
went on an eighth grade trip to Washington, D.C., and this is the summer of 1988. And
Wow.
this is somebody that I had not thought of in 25 years, 30 years, that whose name popped back into my head. And it was just like, you know, I remember early in one trip seeing a bunch of people I know kind of like gathered around me and thinking, wow, this many people or this amount of people only really shows up for you if you're about to die. And they were like, no, you're not going to die, but we're here to take this journey with you. And that was really profound. I used my partner as a grounding device. So whenever I sort of felt like I was out of control, I would either picture his hand and grab onto it, or I would wiggle my toes and wiggle my fingers just to like feel like I was standing on something,
Mm.
and that would serve as a grounding device. I wrote down a shit ton of stuff that I haven't really looked over since, and I should probably do that. The last session, I felt like I was mouthing words a lot. And then after it, the nurse that was on duty was like, "No, dude, you were talking." So apparently I was a chatty
Huh.
Cathy during the last session. She was like, "You brought up Michael Jackson a lot. Like, what's that
Interesting.
about?" And I just,
Interesting.
I think there was like music playing in my head, or I was transporting myself onto music video backgrounds or something like that. And, so that happened. But it was a really interesting series of experiences. And again, just the things that were unlocked that I hadn't thought of in 15, 20, 25, 30 years, names that hadn't been in my head since I was a kid,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kind of all popped back into my head.
Wow. And I like that metaphor of like they're on this journey with you. But I mean, really, that's life. You're going through life, and there's all these people and that are on this journey with you. If you
Right.
think about it that way,
Right.
that's kind of a nice metaphor.
Yeah. There wasn't a lot of negativity to the experiences.
Uh-huh.
Anytime someone would pop up in my thought process that was someone that I had a contentious relationship with, or someone that had brought me, stress or pain, I would actually like see my hand pushing them away.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. So it was very much a positive experience.
Almost like seeing yourself setting a boundary
Boundary. Hmm.
without, I don't know, maybe did it feel like you were doing it or you were just watching that
Oh
happen?
no, it felt like I was actually like pushing them away.
You were doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
how did you know to did you like choose it or did it just happen?
That I can't really tell you. I don't know how voluntary my movements
Uh-huh.
were. I feel like it was a conscious decision of this is a bad thought. This is someone that's bad for you. Get them out of the picture.
Hmm.
Focus on the good stuff, that kind of thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Wow. And how did all this affect like your mental health, the anxiety, whatever was going on November 5th? What's it like on the other side of it?
It's been about 3 weeks since my most recent session. I got through the holidays in better spirits than I had experienced during any holiday season in recent memory. The holidays are generally a stressful time for me. I have a pretty contentious relationship with members of my family. There's some loneliness that creeps in, but I had 2 weeks off from work and filled up that time really well, prioritized time with people that I care about, minimized my time with people that can be sort of a drain on me. So I think that there are definitely some long lasting effects. I definitely feel like it's faded a little bit. I think my anxiety has been higher than normal the last few days, but that's also getting going back into work, certainly being conscious of current events and upcoming events. And the guy that manages the clinic, the doctor, was like, "Look, this isn't a cure. This isn't going to
Hmm.
get rid of your depression. It's not going to get rid of your anxiety, but hopefully." And one thing ketamine is supposed to do is sort of like stimulate your neuroplasticity
Hmm.
so that you're able to utilize coping strategies that maybe you'd been resistant to before. And he said what this is supposed to do is to give you different ways of hopefully coping with and dealing with the stress that you encounter. And
Right.
I feel like so far that has been the case.
Hmm.
One specific thing I've noticed is that I tend to stew. When something bothers me, I can't brush it off. It'll stay with me for hours, days, weeks, months, whatever. Things have been going away a little bit easier, or a lot easier
Hmm.
in some cases, where
Hmm.
something will annoy me, and then 10 minutes later, I'll have moved on to the next thing in a way that I was not able to before.
Yeah. Letting
Um,
things pass by and let
yeah,
go and flow through. Yeah.
yeah,
What you said makes sense because also my experience is like it's not like plant medicine fixes everything and you're healed instantly just by sipping it. What it really does is gives you a reset, like a mental and physical reset. And I was listening to a Radio Lab episode about psychedelics and LSD and stuff. And a lot of the research is telling us that it induces a state that's childlike in terms of the ability to form new connections in the brain and learn things that actually, like, the way like children can learn a language easier, like, because that's what this kind of medicine does, is it gives you that kind of fresh, clean slate to learn new things. And so I've been really focused and intentional about trying to notice that and push myself the way I want to go, because it's not like everything is solved from taking the medicine. It's like, no, okay, it's giving you an opportunity to address things differently and to chart your path forward. So the time after the medicine is really almost as important, if not more important, than the journey itself.
Right, exactly. And I've been wondering whether it's like how much of an impression is the medicine making, because this happened at the same time that I was looking at 2 weeks off from work and a holiday reset. And I've been deliberate about going to the gym more regularly and meditating more regularly. And I'm putting all of these things in practice at the same time. So it's difficult to attribute any change to one specific thing, but it probably is all of the things in combination kind of putting me in a better head.
Right. And it is all connected. Like for us too, we had a specific dieta beforehand, so I'm eating differently. I'm in a more healthy mindset. We weren't supposed to drink alcohol or smoke weed for a month before ayahuasca, which was the longest I've ever gone without smoking weed in a while.
Right. Good for you.
And it really like set me up. And afterwards, I'm more into meditating. I'm more into just reflecting and resting and not pushing myself so forward. And some of that's because of the insights from the medicine. And some of that's because I met people who do that and it sounded interesting. So it all comes together, and the tendrils of the medicine go into these other areas, but there's a reason it's all connected. This mindfulness stuff is all connected.
Right. And I wanted to ask you, my experience was very solitary. It was me and a nurse, and the nurse was just kind of there to make sure I didn't die. There wasn't a lot of interaction in the middle of the experience with anybody else. You had what sounds like a very communal type of experience. What was that like to sort of go through that with other people?
Yeah. So I'll tell you that, and I'll just tell you kind of what the ceremonies are like in general. So I started with the mushroom ceremonies, and actually they're very similar because the plants are from the same lineage and the ceremonies are similar. But basically it was in my friend's living room. There's about 10 of us. You have your little yoga mat space or cushions or pillows, whatever you want to set it up with. And then we did about 2 hours of work before taking the medicine, and we share our intentions. We go over what might happen so nobody's freaked out. We went to the backyard and offered blessings to the land. And then we take the medicine. It takes about 20 minutes to kick in. The mushrooms kick in pretty quickly. And then I also worked with a blindfold a lot. You don't have to, but it does really help you to go inward and not just sort of like look at what's going on with everyone else. Because to answer your question, it's a very communal experience. And at the same time, we're all taking active measures to not be too involved with each other's journeys. Like, you don't want to get sucked into what someone else is going through, because there's really no way to know what they're going through. Sometimes people are crying and they're having the best time, or sometimes someone is throwing up and can't breathe well, and it seems really difficult for them. And afterwards they'll say, oh my God, that was such a needed release. And I'm so glad I got that purge out of me. It was amazing. And so you don't want to get too wrapped up in the details of what someone else is going through. And yet at the same time, we're all in the same space. And the thing that connects us is the singing. So we sing these songs. They're called ikaros, which are old, songs that the plants taught to the indigenous people who cultivated those plants. They came through these ceremonies and through the people, and now those indigenous people have passed the songs down for many generations. So these are, the songs of the plants. And as crazy as I know that sounds to many people, and that sounded to me before I did it, when we were in the medicine, it made sense. Like
Sure.
the songs sounded like what the plants felt like. And it really sounded right. Like I had never heard these songs before, but very quickly it felt very familiar. And I was joining in with these songs that I didn't know the first time I did it, and even more so each time. And basically the 6 hours of the journey, you're either singing these songs or mixed in with a Spotify playlist of relaxing, calming music, some other kinds of stuff, like uplifting kind of stuff. He mixes it in. And so you're singing together, you're hearing each other, you know that people are there, and yet you're going to your own place and you're
Right, you're
having
very in
thoughts
your
that are your
head.
own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
Okay.
the combo of that is kind of fascinating. Like we are in it together, and the energy of other people does affect you. And especially people sitting next to me, I felt like, oh, they're going through something. I'm going to help them by breathing calmly. And then that person told me later, thank you for what you did for me during that journey. And I'm like, all I did was breathe calmly because I heard you kind of struggling. And they're like, yeah, I could sense that. And it was really helpful and it was grounding. So you're interacting with them, not by talking to them or touching them, but just by sending your energy back and forth. And people can feel it. It's crazy, but it's real.
I get it.
Yeah. And
And
then can I tell you about the insights I had personally too?
sure, please. Yes.
I'll try to be brief because I could probably talk for 10 hours and not fully explain it. You can't really explain these things to people as much, sometimes trying to explain it dilutes it and cheapens it.
Mm-hmm.
But the first mushroom ceremony, my intention was to find some clarity and acceptance. I learned that your intentions going in are really important, and you will often get exactly what you ask for. And the way it's been described to me is you're having a conversation with the plants, and the plants are intelligent and have been here for millennia, and they will respond to your intentions. And I absolutely believe this is true, and it's not a metaphor. And I had a conversation with the plants, but I asked for clarity and acceptance. And as soon as it hit, like fully, I laid down because I just felt like I had to lay down. And I felt this complete, total feeling of acceptance of everything around me. And it wasn't just in my head. I've accepted a lot of things in my head. This felt like it traveled down through my whole body.
Wow.
And I felt this complete feeling of total acceptance. And all the things I have doubts about in my life and worries, like, am I on the right path? Is this the right decision? I just accepted everything and realized, yes, I'm doing everything I can and I'm making the best decisions I can. And I had this deep trust in myself. And that once I felt that, that gave me the clarity. I was like, yeah, my doubts are what's silly, and what the doubts melted away. And it really just gave me this confidence in everything I've been thinking and I'm believing, and all the stuff we talked about last time about bisexuality and masculinity. Like, it just gave me a lot of confirmation that the road I've been on makes sense and is valid, and I felt the truth of it.
Were you
Yeah.
sitting on a lot of doubt regarding that prior to this experience?
I think in my head, no. In my head, it all has made a lot of sense to me, and my coming out journey has felt like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But it's all been up here. And I don't think I even realized how maybe I was still holding on to some of the doubts in my body. And I lived for almost 30 years as a straight person and trying to fit into a box. And that creates tension in your body. And as much as I was beginning to understand in my head, I think I hadn't fully let go of that tension in my body. And the plants really helped me feel that confidence and relaxation and acceptance and connection with just the energy of the universe. And it's so hard to explain. But yeah, I think there was stuff that I hadn't fully accepted fully. Yeah.
Right.
And then my second mushroom journey was I really connected with my Judaism in an interesting way. Like
Okay.
my last name is Cohen. The Kohens are the high priests of Judaism, which never mattered to me and was never part of my temple experience. But suddenly I saw myself as this Kohen, as this high priest. My dad was a big part of that second journey. I really connected with him and his energy in that one and the music of it. And he's a bass player, and I heard the bass line as him. Like what you said about different people coming up, that happened in all my journeys. Like I would think of people, and everything I thought of, I gained new clarity and insights into whatever thoughts I used to have about them. And it's too much to go into, but everything I thought about, I got an insight about it. That's was valuable. Awesome. But on my third mushroom journey, I got the message from the mushrooms that, okay, you've done this 3 times. It's great. You're learning stuff each time and you're ready for the next level. Like I wasn't sure I was ready until that ceremony. And in the medicine, the plants told me you're ready for the next level. And the next level is ayahuasca. I think it's a good analogy. If you're interested in this stuff, start with mushrooms, work your way to ayahuasca. And the ayahuasca was a 3-day ceremony. We did 3 sits, Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday morning. Okay. We woke up and drank ayahuasca for breakfast.
Okay.
Interesting breakfast. And a lot of it was similar. Like I gained insights, everything I thought of, some new insights popped up. I learned a lot about specific things I thought about that I won't necessarily go into. But the big thing that happened there was I really felt like I connected with a higher power, with the spirit of the plants, with the energy of the universe, for what most people would think of as God.
God, right.
They asked us after the first night, describe your journey in 1 word. And then we shared more later. But my word was God. I didn't even have to think about it. That was what happened the first night, was this energy came to me from all around the room. It sort of converged in this shape right in front of my chest. It was like a prism that reflects the light. Mm-hmm. It looked like a prism right in front of me. And the message it sent me was, here I am, which is a biblical phrase that I am aware of. And it just felt like a message from God to me that I am real, that this is real. Here I am. And it was undeniable. It was there. I didn't reach out and touch it, but it was there. And I know I'm sound insane,
but not at all.
But
I mean, having had a similar experience, clearly you don't sound insane.
Good. Yeah. And then that was sort of the big thing the first night. And then the next night and the third day, the same presence felt like it was there again, but it wasn't a sharp image and it didn't have a specific message. It felt like it was all around me. Always, and it's always there. And I saw the image of vines growing like a thicket that was kind of surrounding me and holding me up. And it was telling me, this is always here.
We got you.
You're always supported. I got you. You can never fall. So I cried a lot on ayahuasca in a way that I don't always cry on mushrooms. I had these tears of joy every 10 minutes realizing that this is real, that this energy exists, that I get to feel this connection with it. And then post ayahuasca, the work has really been like okay, how do I reconnect to that as much as I can all the time in my
Right.
life? This connection is so important. It's everything. And that has really changed my perception of the world and of myself and of my ambitions. It hasn't changed my life completely. I'm not going in a different direction, but it has changed my motivation and my reasoning and how I'm approaching this stuff, and definitely changed my mental health and my energy.
I love that.
This,
And there is, for me as well, like takeaways, things that I'm trying to apply to my life on a daily basis that came up
yeah,
during my experience. And a lot of it is just sort of like phrases or mantras for me. Like during one of my experiences, I I saw the word joy, and it might have been on the side of a mountain or just in big letters. And
hmm.
every now and then when I'm starting to like my brain's starting to like edge back a little bit, I try to pop that image back into my head of just
Hmm.
like joy. Let it go is another one, and that's kind of been an ongoing theme for me for a really long time. But I hold on to a lot of stuff. And like one thing I like to use as an example, I saw a movie a couple days before Christmas called Nickel Boys.
I actually have plans to see it later
Okay.
tonight. I need to go see it.
Oh, right on. It's a great movie. There is a scene involving corporal punishment in the movie that resonated with me very viscerally
Hmm.
because I experienced corporal punishment in pretty much the exact same way when I was a kid.
Hmm.
And when I saw the movie, it was actually 48 hours after my last ketamine session. And I went with my friends Joe and Jason, who were sitting on either side of me. And had I not undergone the experience that I underwent, I don't know if I would have been able to sit through the rest of that movie after seeing that scene. I was
Yeah.
able to take that experience, apply it to my experience, and in one sense let it all go, but
Hmm.
in another sense think of the experience that happened to me and almost recontextualize it and take the experience and offer some grace to my abuser,
Yeah.
um, and just take something that had been really painful and the reenactment of something that had been very painful to me and come to some sort of peace with it. And I
Yeah.
don't know that that would have happened had I not just gone through the experience that I'd gone through.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like one of the things these psychedelic medicines can do is help you to stay with something long enough to get to a place of insight or acceptance or some kind of change, because
Right.
I think so many things that hurt us or trigger us or just feel uncomfortable, like then we move away
Yeah,
from
you
those
run from
things.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the medicine, many people are scared to do these things, and it makes sense. It's scary. I was terrified of
Right.
ayahuasca. Even the moment we sat down, I was ready, but I was still nervous. And if you resist what the medicine is showing you, that's when people have a bad trip. And what I learned before going in and from doing it is it will help, it will hold you, it will give you what you need. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's not going to show you anything you can't handle. And so even if it does feel uncomfortable, surrender, sit
Right.
with it, surrender to it, and that's when you will get the insights. And so doing it in the medicine gives you the experience of what that's like. And then it sounds like that's maybe what happened watching this movie is, instead of feeling that trigger and running from it, you surrendered to it and allowed yourself to feel it, and then some insights came from it.
Right. And that surrendering was part of the ketamine experience too, where I would be laying there and I'd be like, this feels uncomfortable. I don't like this. But I'm here. So why resist it? Just,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know that I ever actually used the word surrender, but you're having this experience. Just have the experience.
Yeah.
Let it go through you.
And isn't that a metaphor for like a lot of things in life?
In
I
life,
mean, we
yeah.
should still have boundaries and you shouldn't
Right.
put yourself in unsafe situations, but like
Right.
there's so many things we resist that actually we can learn from if we let it happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a tendency for people to kind of resist the lightness of life because they want everything to be, they want everything to be storybook like. So I've had this conversation with other people before where they may see problems with their job or their relationship or their whatever. They're like, I'm just going to ignore the fact that this is happening
Yeah.
because this goes against my storybook narrative. But the only way out is through. Unless you go through it, it's not going to minimize, it's not going to go away. It's going to
Right.
reappear at a later date, and it's going to reappear in a larger, more disturbing form.
Right. Turning away from these things, it doesn't actually make them go away. It makes
Right.
them go away for now.
Right.
But actually it can build them up and give them more weight when it does come crashing in, and it will.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The other big sort of metaphor and thing I learned from the process of the plant medicine is we do these songs and a lot of them last a long time. Like some of them are 20-30 minute songs and they feel like they're going on forever. And
Oh
like
man.
you're like, okay, I move it on. But that's the same with the feelings inside. Sometimes you kind of get stuck in something that doesn't feel great. And what they told us, and I did, and now I understand, is everything will change. Everything will move through you. The song will change. The energy will change.
Absolutely.
The feeling will shift somehow. And if it feels like it's getting stuck, it's because you haven't given into it yet. And a bunch of things like that happened to me. And once I surrendered and once I accepted it, that was when it finally shifted. And it just reminds me that every feeling, whether it's good or bad, and I don't even want to judge things as positive or negative, but whatever the emotion is, whatever the situation is, it will change. Everything is only for now. It was funny, on the way home from ayahuasca, I was listening to some music and a lot of songs really resonated differently and made me think. And I heard this song from Avenue Q, the final song, Everything in Life is Only for Now. And I started crying again listening to that song because I was like, yes, exactly. Everything is shifting and fluid and changing.
Always.
And like always.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, you can't stop change from happening, and so much damage happens when you try to resist the naturalness of change.
Yeah, right. And this energy of the universe that I connected with on ayahuasca, it's so much bigger than me or you or anyone. Yeah. And it's beautiful that we're part of it. We're not separate from it. We are part of it. But I had this big ego death moment on ayahuasca, realizing how big that energy is and how small I am. That like, I am nothing except a small piece of that bigger thing. And how amazing that is to be part of that. And then also how small some of my problems seem and how small my anxiety seems compared to how important the energy of the world is. And it doesn't mean we're not important and my feelings aren't important and I don't matter. It actually, we matter. We all matter a lot.
That's right.
But only in relation to this connection with everything. That like, I don't matter on my own. I don't think anymore. I matter as I'm connected to this bigger thing. And that's what really matters, is that connection.
I love that. That.
Yeah. Me too. It's really nice. It's really a nice reframe for me because like, I feel like I had a lot of ambitions in my career with film and TV and everything. And it's not like that stuff has gone away. I'm still pursuing all that. but my goal is not the same anymore. My goal is not be famous, make a lot of money, sell shit. My goal is help spread the word. I'm a evangelical now. My goal is connecting people, connecting ideas, like helping people feel what I'm starting to feel. And if I sell a script that helps do that, great. But the goal is not money or fame anymore. It's that feeling and connecting.
Connection is so important. I mean, the motto for 2025 is community is everything. And I experienced a little bit of frustration because I don't know that everybody's getting the message at the same time.
Yeah.
Or some people are not getting the message at all.
Yeah.
But it really is like connection and community is ultimately what we all desire. We all want to feel like we're a part of something with other people. And I think anything that brings people closer to that in a way that's not corrupted by capitalism or power is a really good thing.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
So kudos to our experiences.
Yay.
You know. And a few months from now, we'll have to get together for another conversation and talk more specifics about these experiences. And also talk about what you've been experiencing outside of the plant medicine as you journey through your sexuality and your comedy and your coaching and everything else.
Yes. Who cares about all that? No, I'm kidding. No, it's all related, and I'm learning to figure out the flow of all that and get back into comedy and back into writing as well as sticking with the plant medicine. So yeah, we could talk about this for hours and days and still only scratch the surface.
Right.
But yeah, it's cool to hear your journey too, because it's like different medicine, different setting, a lot of differences, and yet also a lot of similar insights and feelings.
Yeah, I definitely want to do the shrooms thing. And if any of my friends that I have discussed this with are listening, let's make this fucking happen. You know, ayahuasca sounds like a very intense experience, and I'm not totally sure that I'm ready for an experience of that intensity.
Yeah.
But, you know, shrooms, some people do shrooms and they want to go hiking and exploring and partying and all that stuff. I want to do shrooms and sit in a room with people I care about and think and talk about feelings.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah.
Yes. So
if you could find some friends who are into that, that's great. And also I will say the ayahuasca, it was intense, especially the third day for me was the most intense, unexpectedly. And in hindsight, the intense part was the best part for me and the part that I needed the most. But also, you should only do this when you feel ready, and you'll know when you're ready. And if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no.
Right.
And you'll know when it is a hell yes, and you'll see. But the first night I was so scared. One of my intentions and what I asked for was a gentle journey. And I absolutely got that. The first night was so gentle. It was not intense. And it was profound and beautiful. But it really does respond to you. And it only gives you what you can handle. And by the third day, I was ready for the intensity. But the first night was so, so gentle. And so that's just something I'll share is like, it wasn't as scary as I imagined.
Love it.
Let's wrap it up and then we'll move on to the intro. And if you're hearing this on Two Bye Guys, you'll hear it out of order.
Right.
But Mike, thanks so much for organizing this.
Of course, Rob.
I loved coming back to your podcast, and thanks for coming on to Two Bye Guys. And
my pleasure. As a not exactly bi guy, I am happy to be here.
Cool. I love it.
Yeah.
You all have already heard the answer to this, but I'm about to be curious and ask what you mean by that.
I mean,
wait 1 second, because
okay.
you already have said this.
Yes.
Okay.
Cool.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Two Bye Guys. Welcome back. It's a new season. We're trying some new things, but we're here with an old friend. He's new to this podcast, although I appeared on his podcast maybe 2 years ago. It's called Detoxicity. He hosts and produces it. He is also a life coach like me, a mental health and sexuality educator, a music executive / record nerd. Welcome to Two Bye Guys, Mike Joseph. Hi.
Thank you for having me, Rob.
Why don't you tell us a little more about yourself and your podcast and how and why we connected? Take it from
Sure.
there.
Thank you. So, Detoxicity came about in early 2020. It was my New Year's resolution for 2020, actually, to create this podcast. And it came together as a result of the work that I'd been doing in the mental health arena, talking about my experiences with depression and anxiety, post traumatic stress, hospitalizations, all that sort of stuff. And also, for a while, I was a co host of a podcast called Life on the Swing Set, in which I discussed swinging and polyamory and my sexuality and sort of the evolution of that. And sort of on a tertiary level, I was also a member of a men's group here in New York City. And I kind of just put all those three things together and was like, this is something that people want to talk about. People want to talk about masculinity. They want to talk about how it relates to sexuality. They want to talk about how it relates to physical health, mental health, family relationships, aging, all that stuff. I have a background in radio. I've done podcasts before. Why don't I just start a podcast? And I was like, well, how the fuck do I find people? And the initial plan was to buy a little dictaphone, a little tape recorder, and run around New York City and record people, which is how Detoxicity started in January and February of 2020.
Perfect time to start an in-person podcast.
And then March 2020 happened, and I was like, oh, we need to go back to the drawing board. And that led to me expanding my network out to people who were not in New York City. And since then, we've recorded almost 200 episodes. I've spoken to people from all across the country. I've spoken to people in Canada. I've spoken to people in England. I have recorded an episode at a swingers resort. I have done all sorts of different things with the podcast, and it is my baby. It is still very much a labor of love. I think we've really only scratched the surface. I think this podcast with this topic is needed now, maybe more than ever.
Yeah.
And as long as people are willing to talk, I'm willing to listen.
Cool. I love it. Everyone should go check out Detoxicity. I'll put the link in the show notes. And it's interesting. I mean, we've interviewed different people. We don't talk about all the same things, but there's definitely a lot of overlap.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap.
Two bi guys and what you just mentioned, because we started with bisexuality, but very quickly it turned into masculinity and relationship styles and mental health, because it's all so interrelated.
It is so intertwined. Absolutely. Yeah. They don't exist without the other things.
Yeah. So, and you said, people will hear this at the end, but you just said, as we were wrapping up our other recording, you're sort of a bi guy. So tell us, what did you mean by that, and how do you identify, and how's that related to your masculinity?
I identify as queer. Most of my sexual relationships and pretty much all of my romantic relationships have been with women, or with men. I'm sorry.
I was like, wait.
All right. Have been with men. Gay feels a little limiting because it doesn't represent the totality of my experience. It probably won't represent my future experience. And I just think queer is the best identifier, even though as I've gotten older and queer people have gotten younger, I don't even know if that feels like the best descriptor anymore, because I think young people use queer more to describe gender than they do to describe sexuality. And, I've always felt like a pretty cisgender guy. I've never really had issues or any sort of dysphoria about being a man. So I don't know. I don't know what to call myself. I'm a work in progress, an evolving human.
Interesting. Same with me. I've always felt like a cisgender man, and I feel like my place in this is push the boundaries of what does that mean, and how can cisgender men present themselves and act. But yeah, it's interesting, the queerness, being about sexuality or about gender or about both, and how younger kids are using it slightly differently. I think somebody, now I'm going to get this wrong, but somebody on last season said that they what was it? There was someone who said something that was connecting those two things, that their sexuality and gender were inherently tied, which of course makes sense.
Right.
I'm spacing on this. Okay. Anyway, moving on. Tell me, what was your path? Like, did you always identify as queer or as gay or as straight? Like, when did you realize and when did you?
I, from a very young age, I knew that I was different. I knew that boys were supposed to fall in love and be interested in girls. That's what I was socialized into. And I mean, 4 or 5, when I sort of knew that my interest included boys, men, whatever. And I don't know if I was able to articulate that to myself until I was in my late teens. And I didn't fully come out until I was in my 30s. I, you know, I am a fairly, and this sounds so limiting, like I'm a straight presenting person. Most people don't know what my sexuality is until I announce it to them, which is, I think, kind of silly because you don't know what anybody's sexuality is until they tell you, but people make assumptions based on stereotypes. So I'm able to, mask isn't the right word. I'm able to hide in plain sight, basically. And that's always been the case. But from the time that I was, I want to say 18, and started having sexual relationships with other men until I would say I was maybe 31, 32 years old, I was sort of situationally in and out of the closet. Certain friends knew that I was queer, certain friends did not. I was in the closet at work. I was in the closet to my family. I didn't come out to my family until I was maybe 36. So, there was a good 20-year period where I was kind of situationally out, situationally in, and now I am completely out. Like the closets have been run over by a truck. So it's been a bit of a journey in that regard for sure.
Amazing. Cool. I love it. And so, like, it's funny you started in 2020. We started at the end of 2019 with Two Bi Guys. We were in person too at the beginning, and then it shifted. But this is, I think, episode 80 something of Two Bi Guys, and you're almost at 200. That's amazing. You've done more than double what we've done. I'm very impressed.
We were going weekly for a while.
Wow.
And the first maybe 2 or 3 years, we put out an episode every week. And then I was like, this is too much. This is a lot of work. We're asking too much of people who are listening. And then I pulled back to every 2 weeks. So had I continued to do every week, we'd probably be up to like 300 by now.
Yeah, that's a lot. I'm glad you came to the realization that that's too much because you're making me look bad. But yeah, I've kind of settled down. I'm trying a new thing this year where I'm not on even on any strict schedule, although we have been on the every other week thing at times, and I try to do like 20 episodes a year.
I think that might be my next move. Like I want to get to 200, and then I think once I get to 200, I'm going to start spacing them out a little bit more.
Yeah. That was actually an insight from my plant medicine, was just like, you don't have to be so strict about these things. It'll happen when it happens. Do it when it's in flow, and the product will be better.
It'll be better for it. Absolutely.
Yeah, that was one of the insights I had, is just like, everything will happen when it happens. I'm not going to forget about this podcast, and people, they'll listen when it shows up, and they'll be okay when it doesn't show up.
Right. Absolutely.
So hopefully you all agree. If you don't, let me know. Send me an angry comment. What are some of the big things you've learned from hosting your podcast, or insights you've received, or just what's shifted for you because of hosting this?
Men need a safe space. And I think there are some people that feel like, well, the world is a safe space for men. And that is true to a certain extent. But when it comes to exploring vulnerability, when it comes to exploring feelings, when it comes to being sensitive, there's still a huge block for a lot of guys. Even the guys that are doing the work or know that they have to do the work, there's still a block. And I feel like it's really important for men to have a safe space with other men to be able to explore things that are going on in their lives, in their brains, in their bodies, without fear of judgment from society, judgment from family, judgment from their partners, that any kind of judgment. Like people still want to explore that. And another thing just that's kind of like ringing in my head right now is that Gen X is so fucked up. I mean, I'll be 49 in a couple of months, and I am firmly Generation X. And I feel like we got stuck with boomer ideals, and now we're sitting watching Gen Z do all these things with gender and capitalism and sexuality, and have the freedom to push back on these things and explore all these things in a way that I personally, and I don't think a lot of people like me could have even conceived of in the 80s and 90s, thanks to the globalization that's occurred because of the internet and the ability to experience different cultures virtually and become aware of different perspectives and take all that stuff in. It's a different world for young people now. And I think that people in our generation are a little envious of that. And those of us who are cerebral, those of us who are doing work on ourselves are kind of like, man, what could we have done if we had had the information at a younger age that we have now and weren't encumbered by kids, mortgages, student debt, all this other stuff that we now have to contend with as mature adults. I've said this a couple of times before, the amount of, and maybe this is just because of who I am, but the amount of men that I know between the ages, I would say 35 and 55, who are in, and this ties into this podcast, who are in heteromantic relationships or marriages, who are like, maybe I'm not as straight as I thought I was, is just mind boggling. And I don't know if maybe I get so much inbound on that because of who I am and what I do, but it's come up in conversation with 6 to 10 different friends in the last year.
Wow, interesting.
All around the same age.
I think it might be because of what you do and what the space you create to facilitate talking about masculinity, because it does feel related that as the options open up, as we understand more and as the younger generation is becoming more comfortable with stuff, the options of masculinity are expanding and the options of sexuality are expanding. And if my beliefs are true that like sexual fluidity is really normal and natural and it's been conditioned out of us,
I agree.
Then there's a huge population under the surface that has not explored this because there's so much stigma around it, but in their natural state they would. And so it makes sense that they're telling someone like you that, and they feel safe to do that with you because of just what you know and what you talk about on your, in your work.
Right. And, a big issue around that as well is that HIV and AIDS is not as, it's not a death sentence anymore the way it was when I was a young person, when I was beginning to explore my sexuality in my late teens and early 20s. And that was omnipresent, particularly New York City in the early to mid 90s. My first job out of high school was working at a record store. And I would say out of 40 to 50 employees there were probably like 5 or 6 who were HIV positive. So New York City, to be a gay or bisexual man in that environment, it was fraught. And then if you're getting your news from just this concentrated amount of sources, the way that it was in the 90s, you're hearing about all of these people dying. You're watching The Real World and seeing Pedro Zamora, and you're like, oh crap, like if I want to pursue a relationship or sleep with another guy, not only do I have to worry about the societal stigma and gay bashing and all this other stuff, but I got to worry about getting a disease and dying.
Yeah.
Like that, I think the fear of that, I think, scared off thousands of people who in 2025 now are like, maybe I would experiment.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm working with many men in that exact boat now who are married and a little bit older than me, many Gen X, and who like, yeah, that was unthinkable then because you could die. And now that it's not, they're like, well, well, this has been something I've thought about. Why not? And it's a difficult position to be in, but I'm glad things are shifting. But I have a question. I'm confused. Why do you think if Gen Z has all this new understanding and openness and no fear of death because we have PrEP and everything, why do you think they're so fucked up where you started?
Oh no, I said Gen X is fucked up.
Oh, you said Gen X.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
misheard that. Oh, okay. So Gen Z is like gets all the benefits of this, and it's Gen X that is having to deal with the shift. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that there's a fair amount of envy there because of the amount of freedom that these young people have, the self-awareness and the freedom that they then have to explore themselves. It's an interesting thing to live with because I do think that there are a lot of, again, people in my age range who are kind of like stuck almost.
Mm.
And, you know, the 80s and 90s were such a conservative time. I mean, great, you had Prince, but it was still like that stuff was very taboo.
And it is difficult to reconcile all that and to actually move forward and explore those things if you want to when you feel like the chance passed you by or people feel like they're too old, but you're not.
You're never too old. You're
Yeah.
never too old.
That's what I learned going to my first bi discussion group was like there were people in there who didn't come out till their 60s and they were so grateful that they did. Or there's people who explore these things even later in life, and it's never too late to live your authentic life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I also just want to comment on the safe space for men where you started. Like, amazing answer and so important, and something I've been thinking about a lot, especially after the election, because something is happening that's not good, not working.
Right.
And people, men especially young men, moved toward Trump this year. And we don't have to analyze the Trump of it all right now, but there's something missing. There's no safe space for people, or they're finding what they feel is a safe space with the Joe Rogans of the world, right, and the manosphere and the right-wing bloggers. And I don't know that that's actually a safe space. It might feel safer in certain ways, but we do really need these open spaces. You can be yourself. And it's been so valuable for me. And the plant medicine has really allowed me to be open and vulnerable and connect in a different way and just really get to what's inside and not feel like you have to fit in, but you can actually just be yourself. So I totally agree with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we said when we were speaking earlier, everybody desires community. Everybody needs community. Everybody wants community. And I do think that there are some communities that center people who are disenfranchised that leave men out, specifically white men, but, men in general as well. And I think as a result of feeling like they don't have a voice, rightly or wrongly, these men have all sort of moved over to the dark side when there was a chance when they could have been saved. And right, that is such like a delicate line to walk. And I don't have a solution for that. I don't have an answer for that, but I think it's important to acknowledge that.
I don't either, but that's exactly the question I've been asking myself since the election is like, what is that space where we can listen to men and validate men and give them a chance to be brought in, as opposed to like where they're going, which actually I think is counterproductive. And I mean, we could get into this for hours, but it is a tightrope. Exactly what you said. Like, where is the lane? What is it that we need to explore to bring these men into the kind of work we're doing that's free and open and loving, but right now coming this way, they're being pushed that way, and there's many things
other direction.
And there's many things that liberal, progressive, queer communities have done to, that inadvertently push them. That wasn't the intention, but it has had the effect of pushing people away. And actually, I am looking for ways to bring them. You got to bring them back in. Straight men, or straight quote, back in. Like, what are those ways? And I don't know the answer either, but it's exactly the question I think that's on my mind lately. Yeah.
So thanks, Rob, for being on the podcast and sharing a very interesting set of experiences with me and with our listeners. And if you are interested in keeping in touch with Rob, learning more about Rob, this probably won't be his last appearance on the podcast. You can go to robertbrookscohen.com. You can also follow him on Instagram at Robert Brooks Cohen. And then, of course, there is the Two Bi Guys podcast, which you can find anywhere you listen to podcasts, including this one. And if you are interested in Rob's book, his book is called Bisexual Married Men, Stories of Relationships, Acceptance, and Authenticity. It came out last year. It is a really interesting collection of stories from a group of bisexual men who are married to women and were very open about sharing their experiences. And I don't just recommend the book to bisexual people or spouses of bisexual people. I think everyone that reads it can get something out of this, in much the same way this podcast is not for men only. Not just for black men, not just for straight or queer men. It is, I think, we speak of experiences that are applicable to any gender, any orientation, any race, any life experience. Anyway, thanks again, Rob, for taking the time to be on the show, and I look forward to your next appearance. Thank you for listening to Detoxicity. I hope you found this particular episode interesting, and if you are new, I hope you go back and listen to all of the older episodes. Once again, my name is Mike Joseph. I am the host and producer of this show, and there are a lot of things that you can do to continue to support our mission, continue to support this podcast. Follow me on social media. I am on Instagram, Twitter, and I'm on TikTok as DetoxPod Guy. You can also send me an email if you'd like. I'm at detoxpod@gmail.com. I am always on the hunt for people with interesting, inspirational, and powerful stories. So if you know somebody who fits that bill, or if you yourself fit that bill, please don't hesitate to drop me a line via email or via social media. Please make sure you subscribe on your podcast platform that you're listening to this on. Rate, comment, help a brother out, help us move up in the rankings. Follow me on social media. Like I said, follow our Patreon, or subscribe to my Patreon, actually. Patreon.com/DetoxicityPod. You get access to exclusive episodes. You get episodes a little earlier than the general public. You get a cool-ass sticker, lots of stuff. Once again, Patreon.com/DetoxicityPod. Quick shout out to Calvin Williams for providing the music and doing his magic on the logo, which was originally designed by Jacob Block. I thank you all for listening. I wish you all the best. Please take care of each other. Till next time, peace.